Just a bit of a remarkable interview. Lesley Stahl here to share more about it. The sit-down with the president-elect and family. Lesley, remarkable stuff that we saw there in so many ways, but from 35,000 feet up, I know you said just quite simply, you've seen quite a change in Donald Trump, the man.
Well, didn't you?
It's, you know, to read tea leaves and body language, it would appear as though the enormity of the situation has occurred to him.
Yeah, it's definitely sinking in. As we were speaking and I was asking him these questions, I could feel that he understood the weight and the enormity of what he's taking on. He was far more serious than he had been the last time I interviewed him. The last time, he was sitting on the edge of his chair leaning in. This time, he was planted in his chair. Just the body language was completely, totally another person. Everything.
You asked him about fear.
I did. And he'd said no, right away, off the bat. You mean his fear?
Yeah.
Yes, whether there's any...
Did you buy it? As an interviewer, did you buy it?
Well, his demeanor certainly led one to believe him. You know, I don't think he's reflective as a person. And I was thinking about that. You know, he said he had no regrets. He didn't apologize about anything. And I'm wondering if that isn't, it's kind of the mark of a strong leader, if you know what I mean. They don't second guess themselves and they convey a sense of self-assuredness and confidence that I bet they teach this in business school, you know, just convey confidence and people will believe in you. And I don't know if he got that from business school or if it's a natural instinct with him.
Much has been made of his combative relationship with the media, of perhaps how and in what ways he was taken less than seriously. And I wonder, you know, it was said of him, certainly during the last month of his campaign, that his supporters took him seriously, but not literally.
Right.
The media took him literally, but not seriously.
I love that. That came from I read that in the Atlantic monthly.
Well, and so as we saw him say to you about things like Obamacare, things like immigration, we saw him step away from the extreme positions he'd taken in the campaign. What was your sense then of his commitments as they regard his campaign promises?
What I decided was that he saw these statements as opening bids in a negotiation. You know, why go halfway? Let me start way out here and I'll deal with it, you know, compromise, as any deal maker would. I also think he feels that his people didn't take him literally, just what that quote said. And I think that there was something reassuring in that he is willing to fuzz up the edges. I think that he was conveying to the public, I'm not going to be extreme.
Well, because you talked about fear as well, about as they regard the protests we've seen across the country, individual incidents of what would be and have been harassment and have been classified in some cases as simply hate crimes. And I know he expressed surprise, and again, considering the campaign he just ran, is that a position he can occupy? Surprise?
Good question. Well, it was an interesting part of the interview because he had said he wanted to unify the country. But that part, when I asked him, do you feel you have to say something? Do you feel you have to worry about people being afraid? It almost dawned on him when I said it. You know, he hadn't been thinking along those lines. So, I don't know. I think obviously he's torn because he really needs and wants to keep his coalition, his movement together. And he wants to assure people. And that's always going to be a tug and pull for him. And I felt him kind of grappling with it right there and then with me in the room. And he wants to blame the press for everything. Even the demonstrations. They're professional protesters.
The first tweet he sent.
And we, the press, the media, whipped it up. So, you know, and believe me, he showed no combativeness, no bitterness toward anybody but the media.
You mentioned that push-pull then. We then saw, as he appointed his first two big hires, and really it's a snapshot, I think, of exactly what you just spoke to. Reince Priebus as chief of staff, and Stephen Bannon.
The establishment and the alt-right, I guess.
And
well,
saying they're going to be equal partners.
I want to remind everybody that when Ronald Reagan was president, in his first term, there was a troika. It was Jim Baker, Ed Meese, and Michael Deaver. They had equal power. Mm-hmm. It was a tripartite running the White House. And I will tell you, that was one of the most brilliant first terms of any president in getting things passed and making that White House work. It was astonishing. I mean, everybody thought it wasn't. How can you have a team running a White House like that? But that tension that was always there somehow worked and allowed Ronald Reagan to keep his image as a conservative, a sort of far-right conservative. In those days, it was considered far-right, and yet be accommodating at the same time. He was able to do it partly because his advisors were doing the push and pull for him.
Steve Bannon is considering.
Yeah, but Edwin Meese was thought of in those days that way, you know, not exactly the same, but he was thought of as extremely conservative in those days. I'm not drawing a direct parallel, but it does strike me that that kind of push and pull in a White House has worked before.
Well, we're going to find out.
We are definitely going
to. I do want to ask, and you mentioned the tweets that he sent. He sent a professional protester tweet. Somebody got to him. He must have woken up, and he appreciated the great passion of the protesters across the country.
He came back to professional with me, which was after that sequence.
And we saw him attack the New York Times this weekend as well.
Oh man, all through this interview, he attacked the press.
Can he continue to tweet? Is that not? And I know he made great use of it. They acted as targeted ads to millions of people throughout the campaign, and I know he was aware of the impact of the technology and the platform. But can he now, as the President of the United States, continue to do what he's done on the medium?
He feels he must. He feels that, and I think that he's not wrong, that this is the way to communicate today. This is the way to communicate, therefore lead. That really he does think television news is over. He basically said it. And yes, he's going to communicate that way. There was no question about that. There's a difference, though, between talking to the country through social media and going up to his room, and any time somebody insults him, he just lashes out. He said he would try not to do that. But he is definitely going to use social media to communicate his views and to try to keep his movement together. And maybe talk to the public at large that way. He would love not to have to go through the press to get his message out.
Yeah. Although I do know that you already booked him. I know that the promise was made. The next time he sits down with 60, I'm sure it's going to be you.
Well, I think he likes 60 Minutes because he knows we'll be serious, and he knows we'll be respectful. And you know, when I was interviewing him, I covered the White House, you know, for 10 years, and I had the same thing then. There's the person, and there's the office. He's now POTUS. He's now the President of the United States, which is, you know, he occupies a position that demands and requires respect. It's the office of the president. He's the leader of the country, duly elected, and I wanted personally to show him that respect. The office gets that.
It was a fascinating look. It was a fascinating look with his wife Melania. Fascinating look with the children, who I know were staunch surrogates. And these next 4 years. I look forward to the next installment, Lesley.
Thank you so much, Josh.
I pushed to the outer boundaries of my heart out. So very much appreciate the time.
My great pleasure.